أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Today inshallah we'll talk about the themes from chapter 8 surah Al-Anfal, the spoils of war. Now surah Al-Anfal was revealed in Medina after the battle of Badr, and it discusses many of the events of the battle of Badr in this surah. Now the theme of the entire surah, it deals with divine victory. The laws, Allah put laws in this world. If you want to achieve victory, here's how you're going to achieve it. And He put the laws in this surah. So it was fitting that it talks about the battle of Badr, because that's the most important battle in Islamic history. It was the battle that put the Muslims on the map. It was a decisive battle between good and evil. So it is fitting that a surah was dedicated to its events. Now, to summarize the themes in the surah, Allah is telling us there are two components to victory. If you want victory, there are two components. One is victory comes from Allah alone. Victory comes from Him. So you have to be attached to Him. And the second part is you have to do your part, and you have to do every preparation that you can. Having both of these, being prepared and having reliance and trust in Allah, are the recipe for victory. Anything else is not going to work. So the two main aspects of the surah, there are two different themes in the surah. One is a divine aspect, like I said, reliance on Allah and knowing that you do not achieve victory out of your own effort. It's Allah that provides you the victory. You put the effort, but Allah is the one that provides you the victory. And then the second one is the human aspect, which is the preparations, the planning, brotherhood, unity, all of these important concepts that together with the reliance on Allah will achieve victory. Now, there are two types of people in this world. One type that is religious. They go to the masjid, they do everything, they do ibadah, but they don't prepare. They rely on Allah, and then they don't put the effort. And then you have the other extreme of people that have to measure everything with exact. I mean, it's like, they have to, every angle, every contingency have to be factored, and they don't care about Allah, and they don't care about the divine help. So they're all materialistic. So you have the one end is the spiritual completely with no preparation, and the other one is the material with no spirituality. And both of these ends, don't work. The surah teaches us to be in the middle, to have trust in Allah, but to do our part and be prepared. So that's the balanced approach. So you have two verses that are key in this surah. The ending of verse 10, وَمَا النَّصْرُ إِلَّا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. And victory is not but from Allah. Indeed, Allah is exalted in might and wise. So that's the spiritual part of it, that victory comes from Allah. The second one comes in the beginning of verse 60. وَأَعِدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ وَمِن رِّبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ. We all know this verse. And prepare against them whatever you are able of power and the steeds of war. That's the balanced approach. Allah didn't say prepare, nuclear weapons. He said prepare what you can. You do what you can. You do as best of effort as you can, and Nasr is from Allah. You need both of these two components. Now, if we look at the verses, the surah starts with a question. In verse 1, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَنفَالِ. They ask you, O Muhammad, about the bounties of war. That's after the battle of Badr was done. It was a decisive battle. It was a great battle that the Muslims won, and they were spoils of war. Now what do we do with them? So they were questioning, what do we do with these spoils of war? And the surah says, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَنفَالِ قل الأنفال لله والرسول فاتقوا الله وأصلحوا ذات بينكم وأطيعوا الله ورسوله إن كنتم مؤمنين. They ask you, O Muhammad, about the bounties of war. Say, the decision concerning bounties is for Allah and the Messenger. It's none of your business. That is not why you're fighting for the cause of Allah. The spoils of war is a secondary benefit. It is not the goal of going to war against the non-believers. So the verse is telling them, it's none of your business. I'm not going to ask. Allah is saying, I'm not going to answer you. The question came in the first verse. The answer did not come until verse 40. So Allah is saying, it's none of your business. The spoils of war belong to Allah and the Prophet to do whatever they want with them initially. So, because after the battle, now you have these spoils of war. And if that spoils of war are not divided equally, that can cause problems. Because people, why are you giving him more than giving me? That's when enmity starts. Fighting over materialistic things are one main cause for defeat. When you're fighting for Allah, you don't care about the spoils. The spoils are secondary. But when you focus on the materialistic things, that's a recipe for disaster. So the Anfal is a symbol. The spoils of war are a symbol of worldly gains. When you focus on the worldly gains and you fight over them, you'll never have unity and you'll never have victory and support from Allah, because that goes against the laws that Allah put in this creation. So the first verse asked the question, what do we do about all the spoils of war? Allah did not answer till verse 41. In the beginning of 41, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَهُ وَلِلرَّسُولِ وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ, and so on. And know that anything you obtain of war booty, then indeed for Allah is 1/5 of it, and for the messenger and for his near relatives and the orphans and the needy and the stranded traveler and so on. So the answer to what we do with these spoils of war did not come till verse 41. And between those two verses, Allah laid out all the rules to achieve victory and maintain it. So if we look at the themes in this surah, so the first theme is victory comes from Allah and from Him alone. It does not come from your preparedness. It does not come from your weapons. It does not come from any materialistic thing that you have or you think is going to give you an advantage. Victory comes from Allah alone. And we have to, if you look at the Battle of Badr, it was all arranged by Allah. The timing of it. When the Sahaba and the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam left, they were not going to war. They were going to intercept the caravan of Quraysh. They did not plan to get into a war. But Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala had His own plan. He arranged everything. All the incidents. Nothing happens out of a chance. Allah arranges every single event, for us to, in our lives and in everybody's lives. So they were 313. They had 1 or 2 horses, and Quraysh was 1,000 strong with 300 horses. So in materialistic term, if 313 get into a fight with 1,000 with so many horses, by human measures, it's a short battle. You're not going to win. But Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala arranged the whole, things. He made them sleep to get some rest. He led them to the high ground where it rained on them, it washed them, it purified them, it firmed the ground under them. But the rain made a muddy mess for Quraysh, and it hampered their movements. So all of the events that Allah drove, to the Prophet and the companions, they did not have victory out of their own effort. They put the effort on, and the victory came from Allah. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala arranged, He psychologically prepared them. He made them fall asleep to rest before the battle. He promised them to send angels to help them. Some of the verses says, the angels are going to come and support you, and gave them physical preparedness in rain and firming the ground under their feet. So half of the surah stressed these points, that victory comes from Allah, so trust in Him and ask for His help. And the Prophet ﷺ kept supplicating until his cloak fell off his back. He was raising his hands before the battle for Allah's. They were as prepared as they're ever going to be. So now it's all that's left is to plead with Allah to give them victory and to support them. So the second theme is you have to plan, you have to prepare in order for Allah to give you victory. If you're lazy and you don't prepare, Allah will not give you victory because you don't deserve it. That's the law that Allah put. You're prepared and you have reliance on Allah, you get victory. You don't go through that formula, you're not going to achieve it. And in the verse وَأَعِدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ وَمِن رِّبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ is in verse 60. And prepare against them whatever you are able. He didn't specify anything. Whatever you are able, do your best. Whatever you are able of power and of steeds of war, by which you may terrify the enemy of Allah and your enemy, till the end of the verse. There is no victory without preparedness. There is no victory without putting the effort and putting the best effort and the best foot forward with reliance on Allah. So the success factors and the laws for victory are laid out in this surah. In verse 15 it says, don't run away from the battle. And that's a practical success factor. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا لقيتم الذين كفروا زحفا فلا تولوهم الأدبار. In verse 15. O you have believed, when you meet those who disbelieve advancing for battle, do not turn to them your backs in flight. Do not run away from the battlefield. Unless you're going, other verses says unless you're going to another, rearranging the army. But to run away is one of the major sins. So if you want victory, you have to be steadfast in the battle and you don't run away. And then you are firm and ask for Allah's help is the other component in verse 45. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا لقيتم فئة فاثبتوا واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. O you have believed, when you encounter a company from the enemy forces, stand firm and remember Allah much, that you may be successful. That's the formula. Now there's a spiritual aspect, is obeying Allah and His Prophet will enhance your chances for victory. In verse 20, يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله ورسوله ولا تولوا عنه وأنتم تسمعون. O you have believed, obey Allah and His Messenger and do not turn from Him while you hear His orders. Another one is fight for the right reasons and don't fight to show off. Don't fight so people will say, oh, he's brave, oh, he is, whatever. That's not going to get you victory. You have to fight for the right reason. In verse 47, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ خَرَجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ بَطَرًا وَرِيَاءَ النَّاسِ وَيَصُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ مُحِيطٌ. And do not be like those who came forth from their homes insolently and to be seen by people and avert from the way of Allah. That's the munafiqeen that went out just to show that, that they're fighting. And be prepared. That's a practical one we mentioned. وَأَعِدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ. And prepare against them whatever you are able to. And then this surah contains the most mention of brotherhood and unity, because brotherhood and unity and being all, fighting as one group is one of the major reasons that Allah provides victory. In verse 46, وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ وَاصْبِرُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. And obey Allah and His Messenger and do not dispute and thus lose courage, and then your strength would depart. And be patient. Indeed, Allah is with the patient. inner fighting is one of the sure ways to have defeat, and we see that everywhere. We saw that in the Battle of Uhud, when the Prophet ﷺ told the archers, stay on top of the mountain, do not leave, even if you see us getting slaughtered, do not leave your position. And what did they do? They disobeyed because they wanted to go and get a share of the booty, and then defeat came because they disobeyed. So brotherhood and supporting each other is one success factor to bring on Allah's victory. And there are many verses. Verse 64. يا أيها النبي حسبك الله ومن اتبعك من المؤمنين. O Prophet, sufficient for you is Allah and for whoever follows you of the believers. That's your support group. The fellow believers are your support group. In verse 74, والذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله والذين آووا ونصروا أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم مغفرة ورزق كريم. But those who have believed and immigrated and fought in the cause of Allah, and those who gave shelter and aided, it is they who are the believers truly. For them forgiveness and noble provision. So, there's any place in the Quran where firmness and steadfastness are advised, you will find brotherhood and stressing brotherhood and unity among the believers. Now, if you notice, I spoke about this in one of the khutbahs, there are two different groups of verses describing true believers. أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا. At the beginning, in verse 2, 3, and 4, it describes the believers, and then later on, it has a different description and says, those are the true believers. So, the first part, because again, everything in the surah follows the same themes. So the first group of description of the true believers was a spiritual one, focusing on the reliance of Allah. The second group that describes the true believers was the practical aspect and the effort that they are putting to support each other. So in verse 2, إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. The believers, now the description of the believers, they are those who, when Allah is mentioned, their hearts become fearful. It's a spiritual aspect. And when His verses are recited to them, it increases them in faith, and upon their Lord they rely. Verse 3, الذين يقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. Those who establish prayers and spend from what we have provided them. أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم درجات عند ربهم ومغفرة ورزق كريم. In verse 4, those are the believers truly. Those are the believers. For them are degrees of high position with their Lord and forgiveness and noble provision. The next set that says those are the true believers is talking about والذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله والذين آووا ونصروا أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم مغفرة ورزق كريم. And this is in verse 74. But those who have believed, now all of these descriptions are practical. The first descriptions were spiritual. They believe in Allah. They spend for Him. I mean, they rely on Him, and they perform salah and ibadah. The second description is those who have believed, they immigrated physically. I mean, they left, they did something for their deen. They immigrated and fought in the cause of Allah. And those who gave shelter and aided others. They hosted others who were kicked out of their homes, and they gave them support. It is they who are the believers. Truly for them forgiveness and noble provision. So the first description was spiritual aspect, and the second description was the physical action of giving shelter and support. And both of these combined, are the description of a true believer. He has a spiritual aspect, and he has a physical aspect, with driven to action. So the order is important also, that you have to have the spiritual aspect first, and then the physical actions follow. Now the last point I want to bring is, why was the surah named Al-Anfal? Now the surah discusses the laws of how to attain victory. And the one thing that ruins victory is fighting over materialistic things. And Al-Anfal is a symbol of everything that is materialistic. It's war booty, it's the money, it's the things that really in the big scheme of things are useless. Gold, money, stuff is worthless in the hereafter if you're going to fight over it. It's that if you're going to fight over material things and worldly things, you'll never have victory. The only time you're going to have victory is if you rely on Allah and you obey Him and you put the best effort in and focus on the akhirah and not focus on the material things. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وارنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وارنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه واجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون احسنه وادخلنا برحمتك في عبادك الصالحين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله.